Lena Dunham's Girls has a very special place in my heart. When the show originally aired, I was around the same age as Hannah, Marnie, Jessa, and Shoshanna. And while I didn't live in a hipster enclave in Brooklyn, my parents certainly weren't rich university professors, and I never had the luxury of a gap year to find myself, my life was functionally identical to theirs. I too drifted between unpaid internships, dated guys who either dressed like Booth Jonathan or played in mediocre indie bands, or both. Listened to the constant hum of the media telling me how annoying and narcissistic my generation supposedly was. Attended so many parties and very questionable occasions, and was slowly outgrowing my high school friend group. But maybe most importantly, I experienced girls before I experienced the discourse surrounding it. I didn't know that Lena Dunham's body was being litigated in the tabloids, or that people were outraged by selfish and performative characters. To me, those weren't flaws in the writing. I thought that was the point. I understood that the characters in Girls were often unbearable because they were still in the process of becoming adults. That they were still trying, failing, performing, regressing, and slowly becoming themselves as the show went on. So I want to revisit the first season of Girls, the character arcs, the fashion, the millennial nostalgia, but also what it understood about our 20s that still feels very true today. Also, rewatching Girls made me realize how different being online felt in the early 2010s compared to now. Back then, we were all putting Valencia filters on blurry Instagram photos, treating BuzzFeed personality quizzes like therapy sessions, and wasting entire afternoons playing Angry Birds or Farmville. Now, every third email feels like it's trying to scam me into clicking a fake DHL link, which is why this part of the video is sponsored by NordVPN. What I like about NordVPN is that it has evolved into this all-in-one digital security app. Obviously, the VPN is still one of the core features. It encrypts your connection and protects your privacy while browsing online. That's not going anywhere. But now, NordVPN also includes a built-in privacy-first generation antivirus designed to stop threats before they even reach your device. And that's the big difference compared to more traditional antivirus software. Instead of only reacting after something suspicious is already downloaded onto your computer, NordVPN's next-gen antivirus proactively blocks dangerous websites, phishing attempts, scam links, malware in downloading files, and trackers before you even interact with them. Also, NordVPN can alert you if your personal information appears in a data breach through their dark web monitor feature, which is genuinely reassuring for someone like me who definitely used the same 3 passwords for every account in 2012. So, if you want to check it out, go to nordvpn.com/Kasia, spelled Kasia, to get an exclusive deal with 4 extra months included. Again, that's nordvpn.com/Kasia. There is also a 30-day money-back guarantee, so it's completely risk-free to try out. Thank you, NordVPN, for sponsoring this video. Let's set something straight. Is Hannah Horvath annoying? Yeah. Is she self-centered? Deliriously selfish? Pretentious? Does she frequently overshares and says inappropriate things out loud? Is she deeply convinced that her experiences matter the most?
Yes. Yes.
This is where I suppose most people would stop their analysis of Hannah. Or they would proceed to list all the moments from season 1 she was either annoying or selfish or cringe. But I'm more interested in why Hannah behaves the way she does, and also why people react to her so viscerally, because if we're being honest, Hannah is not even close to being the worst person on TV. She's just one of the few female protagonists who openly display traits women are usually expected to hide, like neediness, ambition, narcissism, self-obsession, the desire to be special, which is also why the infamous "I think I might be the voice of my generation" line from the pilot episode became such a cultural punchline, because people interpreted it as arrogance, which again, is something women should never be, when to me it always sounded more like insecurity disguised as ambition. Hannah desperately wants her life to mean something. She wants to be important and have an exciting life as a successful writer. Right now. Right this second. Actually, this is really her main problem. Despite the fact that Hannah constantly identifies herself as a writer, we almost never actually see her write in the entire season. She talks about writing, she reads some of her work out loud, although it's either an excerpt from her diary or a story she quickly wrote on the subway. And she tweets and she Googles, but actual disciplined creative work remains strangely absent from her life. And yes, there is something so childish and immature about wanting things without fully understanding the amount of work and honestly rejection they usually require. However, the show does a terrific job in explaining why Hannah acts the way she does, and we see that in the episode where she returns to her hometown. Right off the bat, you get the sense that when Hannah was growing up, she was probably the smartest and most artistic person in the whole school or town even. Throughout her entire adolescence, she heard nothing but praise for her creativity and intelligence, and probably there wasn't even that much competition. Also, Hannah is an only child, and so am I, so I can make fun of us. But yes, she definitely got all the attention her parents could give her growing up, and there is something about her mom, and I can't put my finger on what it is exactly. Maybe it's being a professor, or maybe it's using expressions like groovy lifestyle that just tells me she always had a vision of who her daughter would be as an adult. And if Hannah wanted to become, say, an athlete, that wouldn't be accepted by her mother. In the return episode, we also meet Hannah's high school best friend Heather, who is, sorry, I know that's mean, but pretty delulu about her dancing skills and talent, so much so that she decides to move to California to pursue dancing as a profession. And you can tell that Hannah sees herself in Heather, that she too moved to a big city to pursue this artistic, creative life, but now in New York, there is all this competition. There are all those people who are either more determined than her, like her nemesis who published a memoir aged 24, or people who have skills she doesn't have. Like in her unpaid internship, there is a coworker who got hired because she knows Photoshop, and obviously we can all chuckle now because that's like a basic skill in the creative field. But this scene and many more show Hannah that being smart and talented simply isn't enough to become successful, and it terrifies her and it makes her feel lost because when the show begins, Hannah's entire sense of stability is collapsing. Her parents cut her off financially, she has no real income, she dates this guy, Adam, I don't know, maybe you've heard of him, who is intense, but then he disappears for weeks. But the only thing that remains constant in Hannah's life is Marnie. In fact, Girls literally opens with a shot that pans from Hannah and Marnie's legs up to their faces while they're sleeping in bed together. And for a second, you genuinely can tell if they're a couple or just friends until they wake up, which sends this very Sex and the City-esque message that despite all the men and breakup and sex, the emotional center of the show is really Hannah and Marnie's friendship. I actually keep wondering how long they've been friends, probably since college, maybe longer, because their bond is strong, but it's also complicated, which I'd say is very true of female friendships in your 20s, that there is both admiration and resentment, love and hate even. What Marnie gives Hannah is structure and this almost motherly-like care. She's weirdly protective of her. But Marnie is stable, but also emotionally repressed, responsible, but deeply performative. And I think that Hannah envies her structure while simultaneously finding it suffocating. And that's why their friendship constantly swings between intimacy and resentment, admiration and emotional dependency, in a way that honestly feels more emotionally truthful than most romantic relationships on television I've ever seen. Okay, confession time. I am a Marnie defender and apologist, and that is because I am a Marnie. Look, when I was younger, I was more of a Shoshanna Marnie mix with a hint of Hannah's intelligence, but now I have ascended to my true Marnie form, the cringy girl who took a risk and put herself out there creatively. But do you know what? You could change that a bit by subscribing to my channel. I know you guys watch my videos. I mean, if you'll subscribe, I'll still be a Marnie, I'll still be uptight, but I could be a Marnie with, say, 300,000 subscribers, not the harder, better, faster, stronger Marnie. Anyway, from the pilot episode, Marnie comes across as the most responsible and sophisticated of the group. She's the only one who actually has a stable job, she works as an assistant in an art gallery, and compared to Jessa, who wears a sheer dress on her first day as a babysitter, or Hannah's skater dresses with tomato print cardigans, Marnie just looks like an adult woman, with the face of a 22-year-old, but still. From the impeccably groomed hair to her classy smoky eye makeup and jewel-toned dresses, everything about her just screams she's the next Charlotte York or Samantha Jones, especially in those scenes when she's at the art gallery mingling with the artists. She comes across as the next generation Sex and the City character, destined for a successful career and an exciting city life. And that comparison isn't accidental. During its original run, Girls was constantly compared to Sex and the City because, well, both shows are about 4 white women living in New York City, but Lena Dunham repeatedly resisted that comparison, saying, quote, "These are characters who watched that show and it's probably impacted the way they conduct themselves in New York, but their reality is extremely different," end quote. And I think we really see that in Marnie. She's the quintessential millennial young woman who grew up aestheticizing adulthood through shows like Sex and the City. But as an adult, Marnie doesn't really know what she wants, only what she thinks a successful, emotionally mature woman is supposed to want. And as the show progresses, you realize she only cosplays adulthood and stability. On the outside, everything about Marnie says, "I already became the person I'm supposed to be." But deep inside, she's just as lost as Hannah. Maybe even more so because Marnie has no stable sense of self underneath all that performance. And maybe the biggest paradox of her character is that she's a control freak who's absolutely terrified of chaos while also being secretly drawn to it. We see this contradiction in her relationship with Charlie, but also in the way she reacts to Jessa, because Jessa represents everything Marnie secretly envies and deeply distrusts: emotional detachment and unpredictability. So for the most of the season, the two of them exist in this low-level, passive-aggressive power struggle, where Marnie is constantly frustrated with Jessa while also being weirdly fascinated by her. And that is until the episode wherein they accidentally hang out together and we actually see that they weirdly care for each other. I think it's a very, very sweet moment. What makes Marnie such a bittersweet character in the first season is that she's probably trying the hardest out of all the girls to be a functional adult. Almost too hard. I don't know why that is, but I guess in our culture we don't really like people who are trying too hard. In that episode where they all go to a warehouse rave and Marnie shows up dressed like she's attending a networking cocktail event for junior publicists, and she just can't relax and have a good time. But of course, that's also what makes her so entertaining to watch.
Sometimes being inside my own head is so exhausting that it makes me want to cry.
Charlie has been Marnie's boyfriend since college. He's sweet, kind, respectful, emotionally available, very much in love with her. On paper, he's exactly the kind of boyfriend Marnie thinks she's supposed to want. The college flashbacks suggest there once was genuine affection and attraction between them, but by the start of the show, she feels mostly trapped and bored in their relationship. And that's why she's attracted to this pretentious artist, Booth Jonathan. I mean, I'm obsessed with this name. I love it. But Booth is chaos. He's so different from Charlie, emotionally unavailable, vaguely humiliating, and I think that this attraction, deep down, terrifies Marnie, as she desperately wants to be seen as a kind and loving person. And so, even though from the pilot episode, Marnie has been telling Hannah that she wants to break up with Charlie, the moment he ends the relationship, she instantly wants him back. But why? Well, I think it's because Marnie is someone who desperately needs to be in control of everything, pretty much. So in this situation, she's mad that she's not the person who's in control of the breakup. She's not calling the shots. Charlie is. This actually makes her very similar to Jessa. Hannah isn't the only reason why Marnie and Jessa are friends. Neither of them can tolerate rejection. They both need to feel like the person making the choice. Like in that episode where Jessa has a reunion with the only guy who ever dumped her, and yeah, she needs to teach him a lesson. And so Marnie begs Charlie to get back together, and when he agrees, she instantly dumps him, only to regain control of the situation. The problem with Marnie is that she doesn't want to be loved as much as she wants to be perceived correctly. And I think that her growth this season is realizing that even though she's someone who's terrified of messiness, growing up, becoming an adult, having your first serious romantic relationships, all that is inherently messy. So there is no way to control and save her from uncertainty. Oh boy. I have to be honest with you, Jessa has always been my least favorite of the group. I know, I'm sorry. I don't think I have anything in common with her, and I find her character very triggering and often difficult to watch, but that's because, as I said, I'm a Marnie. If I organized a welcome party for my friend and she showed up 2 hours late, acting like it was somehow my fault, I would have to power wash my entire house in silent anger. Look, people like Jessa stress me out because they make everyone else emotionally responsible for their chaos, but I also completely understand why Jessa became such a fan favorite. First of all, she's stunningly beautiful, which I also suspect makes her get away with many bad behaviors Hannah or Marnie would be absolutely mocked or criticized for. Jessa's British accent gives her a worldly edge, and she's fun and charismatic and free and chaotic, but above all, she's a cool girl. Gillian Flynn's book Gone Girl and its subsequent film adaptation named a very specific female archetype that completely dominated the early 2010s pop culture. The effortlessly beautiful woman who is sexually available and somehow always perfectly chill about everything. And that's exactly how Jessa initially presents herself in the show. And speaking about sexuality, what's really interesting is that technically Hannah has way more graphic and explicit scenes in the first season, but it's Jessa who's framed as the sexually experienced one. I think that's because sexuality is part of Jessa's whole persona. It's tied to her mystique, to her charisma, to the image she projects of herself as this low-maintenance, free-spirited young woman untouched by obligation or emotional need. However, from the pilot episode, the show constantly implies that Jessa's lifestyle has consequences, that she can act like intimacy is unserious and her actions are temporary and meaningless, but that's just not true. It's not a coincidence that she's the one of the group who turns out to be pregnant and has HPV. Now, the show never morally punishes Jessa for her relationship with sex and desire, which I love. I love how refreshingly non-judgmental about sex Girls has always been, but still we see that there are consequences for Jessa, and they aren't just physical, but emotional too. And to circle back to Gillian Flynn, she described the cool girl as a performance women often adopt within heterosexual relationships, and how exhausting it becomes to constantly shape yourself around what men find desirable. Similarly, Jessa's cool, artsy, unbothered persona is a performance too, just the reason for it is different. Jessa's main issue is that she's emotionally avoidant and terrified of intimacy. What I personally find the most interesting isn't her emotional avoidance with men, but with her female best friends, so hopefully you guys won't be too mad at me for not really discussing Jeff or Thomas John or this guy, whatever his name was, the one who dumped her the way most people would, but I am different. I am not like you other girls. I actually care for female friendships. JK, I'll be discussing Jeff in a second. Jokes aside, I am genuinely more fascinated by the fact that Jessa is unable to be vulnerable with anyone. Men, women, people older than her, younger than her, her family members, it doesn't matter. There is not a single person in her life she feels safe enough to open up and be completely honest with. And okay, with Marnie, I get it. The two of them constantly antagonize each other. Also, Marnie sees through Jessa way more than anybody else does, so I understand that Jessa might not feel like pouring her heart out to her. But Shoshanna is Jessa's family, and you'd think their bond would be, if not stronger, then maybe more special than with other girls, but it isn't. You actually keep forgetting that they're related. And even though they are roommates now, that doesn't bring them closer together. And it's clearly on Jessa. Shoshanna tries to bond with her many times, like when she offers to create these manifestation boards together, or when she confides in Jessa about online dating or still being a virgin. But Jessa can't tolerate being emotionally needed for too long. Actually, Shosha's openness exposes how constructed Jessa's whole persona really is. So instead of engaging with her emotionally, Jessa mostly dismisses or ridicules her because that's how she protects herself. Then, when it comes to Hannah, I think she genuinely loves Jessa the most out of the group, and that's why this scene hurts so much. Since Hannah is a writer, she romanticizes but also values this kind of artistic chaos Jessa possesses. And I think she even says that she thinks Jessa is fun, and she certainly is, but besides fun, Jessa can't give Hannah anything real or emotionally deep. She can never be vulnerable with her. Like in the episode where Jessa is about to get her abortion, she just yells at Hannah on the street, probably because she's very stressed about the procedure, which is understandable, but she never tells her that. She never says, "Hey, I'm scared," or "I'm glad you're here." Or when Hannah is jealous that her nemesis is a published author and she isn't, all Jessa can do is just offer sarcasm and dark humor, not real life advice. The only person Jessa kind of connects with this season is Jeff, the father of the kids she babysits. What she recognizes in him is another person who doesn't really know where they're going. He's lost, and she understands it because that's how she feels too. But by flirting with Jeff and creating this extremely messy situation in his marriage, she realizes, probably for the first time, the part she played in it. That she's not a victim of her own beauty, but she did really had a role in this whole situation. And this is a massive growth for her character. It's such a win. And then she does this. In season 1, Shoshanna sadly gets very limited screen time, and after reading Lena Dunham's memoir, I think I understand why. Dunham has always been open about the fact that the character of Jessa was closely inspired by Jemima Kirk herself, while Marnie was partially inspired by her real-life best friend, Audrey, who even appears briefly in the first season. Shoshanna, meanwhile, didn't really have a direct real-life counterpart because originally her character was only meant to appear episodically. Shoshanna enters the main group only because she's Jessa's younger cousin. The age difference actually matters here because the rest of the girls have already finished their education and they all went to the same college, while Shoshanna is still at NYU. But what really sets her apart from the group isn't just her age, but her sincerity, which in the realm of the show and its time frame was just, I'm sorry to say, but like incredibly uncool. Look, when I think about the dominant culture of the early 2010s, I think about one word: irony. The collapse of stable career expectations due to the 2008 financial crisis, the constant internet exposure, which you have to remember at that time it was still a new thing, and the feeling that traditional adulthood had become inaccessible or fake created this need for detachment and irony as a protective tool for many young people, and so fashion was ironic, and we see that all the time in Girls. There is even an episode where Jessa wears a bathrobe as a dress and everyone is totally fine with it. Or think about those hoodies with ironically misspelled names of high fashion brands, or the Bad Hair Day beanies. What a throwback. The early 2010s were all about, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, hashtag YOLO. Or the Harlem Shake, or this is so bad, it's good attitude. The deadpan humor was very popular, the rise of memes, like nothing was wholesome and sincere the way Shoshanna is, and everything was jaded and detached the way Hannah, Jessa, and Marnie are. And guys, don't shoot the messenger. I am not excusing the writing. I am simply explaining why Shoshanna serves as a comic relief in season 1, because she's the joke. In the pilot episode, Jessa is introduced as this cool, artsy girl who talks about Flaubert and lives in the moment, but this is her cousin, ha ha ha. It's incredibly cruel. But even reading through the show's reviews from 2012, you can see how many reviewers seemed uncomfortable with the way Shoshanna was. They described her as out of step with the rest of the show. They were mocking her juicy couture tracksuits and her endless Sex and the City references as outdated and embarrassing, which is interesting because looking back now, Shoshanna actually feels emotionally ahead of the others in a lot of ways. Personally, I really love her character. A younger me was very similar to her, and what I admire about her the most is how unapologetically herself she is. She just loves Sex and the City, unironically. She doesn't need the framing of guilty pleasure to be invested in reality TV. She just likes what she likes. She dresses the way she pleases, and even though she desperately wants to be accepted by the group, she doesn't change herself at all to fit in. She never becomes jaded. She only remains kind, enthusiastic, and incredibly funny. Her biggest plotline in season 1 revolves around her virginity. So first of all, she has to admit to the other girls that she's still a virgin. Then she attempts to lose it with this guy, whatever was his name, and then she gets disappointed as it didn't happen. And then she finally meets Ray, whom I can't stand, and they sleep with each other. Luckily, the later seasons give her so much more to do, and I just can't wait to discuss all of them in my future videos. I really love the first season of Girls, and I don't think there is a single bad episode in it. Rewatching it now in 2026 made me so nostalgic for the 2010s. A part of me now wants to dig out my old owl necklace, have a froyo with my friends, listen to Gang Gang Dance or The Knife, and log back onto Facebook. Insane idea, I know. But underneath all that millennial nostalgia, I think what struck me most was how this show constantly frames adulthood as both desirable and deeply disappointing.
You could not pay me enough to be 24 again. Well, they're not paying me at all.
When you're a kid, all you want is to finally be an adult, to have freedom, to make decisions for yourself, but Season 1 of Girls reveals that adulthood is not a finish line, that there is no magical moment when you suddenly become emotionally complete and certain of who you are, which is terrifying because that's exactly what you've been waiting for. Your early 20s give you the most freedom you've ever had, but also the most unstable version of yourself you'll probably ever be. And I think that's precisely why Girls continues to resonate with so many young people, because as flawed as this show is, it perfectly captures the exhausting process of trying to become a person before you ever know what that person is supposed to be.